Things you need to know. First, requirements. You're going to make 2 mugs or cups made with a tapered template. Tapered meaning it goes from wider to skinnier or skinnier to wider, just depends on which way you orient it. So top is bigger, bottom's smaller. You can flip it where the top is smaller and the bottom's bigger. It's perfectly acceptable. So you're going to make 2. The reason we're making 2 is you're going to start on them, then you're going to bag one of them up. And if you really mess up on one, it cracks, it dries out, whatever, you can jump to the other super quickly and kind of run from there. They are face mugs, so that's a requirement. It needs to have facial features. Now, I'm going to leave that up to you. And we talked about this last class period. It can be anything facial related. And it needs to cover about 1/3 of the mug's surface. So that's about 1/3. Okay, so it's going to wrap around a little bit. It's not going to be tiny. We're not going for super simplistic. You can, through your sketches, you can come up with ways of, I don't want to say breaking the rules. You can come up with your own designs, and through your sketches, I will say yes, no, or maybe we can change a few things. Okay? If you have a direction you want to go, then the answer is probably yes, but let's talk about it as we move forward. All right, other requirements. If you make a handle, you need to make it out of a coil, and I'm going to show you how to make the handles. If you make a handle out of a slab, they tend to be floppy, they tend to be weak, and they tend to not function very well, let alone they're probably ugly. So I'll show you how to make handles. They need to have a smooth bottom or foot, no chunks. One of the things about a mug, if it hits your dining room table and you push it and it scratches, it's not functional, and you're going to have to clean that up. And it's harder to do way after the fact than it is to do now. We'll talk about that. It needs to have a smooth, uniform rim. Okay, if the rim isn't smooth, you can't drink out of it. And so you need to make sure that that's smooth and uniform, meaning it's not going from really thick to really thin. Now, if I look at it, I could measure and be like, oh, it's, a tiny bit thinner there. I'm not worried about that. I'm just worried that over here it's, 3/4 of an inch thick, and over here it's a 1/16 of an inch thick, okay? So we need to be able to throw out and roll out a fairly uniform slab, okay? But I'm not going to pull out a ruler and be like, oh, you're 1/16 of an inch too thin here, minus 40 points. Or I could. I think I will. Okay, I'm going to pull out, I'll order a new laser measuring tape. Just be super minute. We'll do that. Never mind. I'm just kidding, I won't. Okay, what was I saying? So 2 mugs with face, 1/3 of the area, smooth bottom or foot. If you make a handle, it needs to be smooth. You can't have sharp things on the handle, because if you do, you're not going to be able to hold it. Okay, so smooth handle. And then if it's a cup, it needs to be functional by holding it like this. So you should be able to. So again, smoothness, it needs to be functioning. It doesn't matter how creative and artistic it is, if you can't use it, hold it, fill it with something, then it's no longer a mug or a cup. And then I want you to come up with something unexpected for your piece. And I'm going to leave that up to you. There's a bunch of ways you can interpret this, and I don't want to tell you what they are. But something that's unexpected. Something you don't see unless you really look for it. I just don't want to go any further than that. You show me. So when we get to the grading stage, I'll be like, what's the unexpected thing? You'll be like, it's here, and this is what it looks like. And I'll go, okay. All right. Definitions. Additive texture is to score and slip something onto the surface. In this case, we would call it sculpting. So the nose, the eyes, the mouth, those are all additive textures. But I'm going to show you some other additive textures today. So anything that is added to the clay or the surface. Carved or removed texture. So this is clay that is removed or cut away to add whatever texture or design you want on there. As I come into mine today, I didn't grab let's use this tool. I've added the lids, but I'm going to come in here and carve or remove some information so I can get kind of the underline under the eyes. Okay? So make them look old. And there are a bunch of tools to do that with. Next definition, an embellishment. Something added to or taken away to create interest or beauty. So embellishment started with an E, embellishment, is something added to or taken away to create interest or beauty. It doesn't actually have to make it more beautiful. It could be ugly or interesting or fun or whatever. So embellishment. And then the last definition I think I'm going to talk about today is colored slip. And this is watery clay that has mason stains in it that add color. You don't really need to know it has mason stains, but watery clay that has a colorant that we can paint on to create designs, patterns. In this case, it could be white eyes, white teeth, brown eyebrows, any number of things that you want to do. We can paint it. Okay. You ready to start? All right, set that there. So the first thing you need to do, you need to get a template, you need to get your sketches, and you need to get your clay. So you should write that down. Template, sketches, and clay. So our templates are going to come in two forms. They're pretty similar in size. I have a couple of these tar paper templates. Then I have a whole bunch of these paper templates. Okay, and there are different sizes, but this is a good size. It makes a good mug. Something I want you to pay attention to. This mug, since I made it, is already about 3% smaller because it's starting to shrink. By the time it's all the way done firing, glazed, and firing again, it'll be about 13% smaller than when I started. So if it was a 10-inch mug, it's going to be like 8.7 inches when I'm done. Does that make sense? So we're going to make them slightly bigger, and then when we're done, they'll be smaller. Same thing goes for handles. If this is a 4-finger handle when I start, it's a 3-finger handle when I'm done, because it's going to shrink. If it's 3 fingers, it'll be 2. Okay, and you've got to kind of pay attention to those things as we move forward. So we're going to get this, and just so you know, this cart up front here is going to be our stage for so many things, but anytime we have a specific something for a project, it's probably on this cart. So the templates, that's where they'll be if you need to get a new one or put yours back. If there's something specific I want you to use up there, that's where it'll be. And it's not where the colored slips will be. Those are back by the clay that we get every day. Okay, can you cut that out for me? If you don't want to, that's fine. You can pass it down. What else will be up here? Oh, we got these little flower pots. These are used to help keep our pieces round or round-ish. Kind of a cool little technique we'll use. Okay, now we need to know how much clay to throw out. So if we have our template, okay, and he's cutting one out, they're pretty much the same size. We're going to grab our clay, and I need to throw out that much clay plus a little extra. Remember, it tapers down, right? So it always goes from a good thickness, and then the edges get thinner. So I need something bigger. So in this case, I need to throw out something about that big. Okay, so we can do that. And then I'm going to need to throw out a bottom. Now, these paper ones have a circle. Don't use it. There's no need for that circle. So we're going to cut out a chunk of clay. Now, this is brand new clay. What was I going to say? Oh, we get this underneath our tables. Sometimes it's just left on top. That's where it grows. It just grows from underneath the tables. And what you need to do is just grab it and cut it. Remember, there's a good way to cut clay. You're going to find where you're going to cut it, make a line, put your thumb directly behind it, and pull right towards your thumb. What we don't want to do is cut little thin strips. If you're cutting thin strips, you're going to have to wedge this up more than you want. So I have that. That's probably 1.5 times what I need, but it'll be okay. Because we're also going to use some for our facial features and some other things. So we're going to set this here. So remember that information on you have to wedge your clay. Okay, this clay was just pulled right off the block. I am not going to wedge it. Okay, and it's not a big deal, but I am going to do this. I'm going to come in here and slam it down a few times. That warms it up, and then I'm going to start to throw out my slab. Okay. If I have other chunks of clay that I want mixed into this, then I'm going to wedge it up. Okay, but I'm just going to take this and throw it down. And when I do this, I always throw down far enough that I can get my whole template on in this direction, and then I turn it and just finish throwing it. Okay, I don't try to make it round. I just go, that's how much clay I need. Now I need to finish that off. So we're going to one more throw, and come here. Now, if your clay ends up being a tiny bit thick up through here, there's actually a way we can fix that later, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So even if it is one side's a little thicker than the other, and you're like, I want to even that out, I'll show you how to fix that. All right, we're going to come in here. Come on, just a little. Perfect. And we're going to set that right there. See, that's a lot of clay. Now, you can grab a ruler or a measuring stick. I like to cut these very specifically. So I throw out my clay to the template size plus a little extra. Now I'm going to cut this out. So as I put this down, I'm going to cut my curves straight up and down. I'm just trying to be as close to it as possible, fairly careful. Okay, my curves are straight up and down, okay? My edges, I'm going to cut at an angle or a bevel. So what that means is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to cut inwards on one side and out on the other. In other words, my needle tool is pointing the same direction for both cuts. If I go in and in, I'm going to create a point, and I don't want a point. I want this to actually wrap over. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. So in one side, out the other. That way when I wrap it over, they overlap, and they create the same thickness of the clay that we had before. Okay, so it's not a very thick piece. If I didn't, it would overlap, and it would be twice as thick. Okay. So I'm just going to pass those down. Just check those out. So write that down. I'm going to taper this in one side and out the other. It's just going to make your life easier. And I'm going to do this with a measuring stick. So taper in and out. But the best way to remember it is my needle tool is pointing in the same direction for both cuts. Okay, so when I cut in, I'm going to cut this so that my measuring stick is lined up exactly on the edge of my paper, my template. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to cut in. I could tell you that this is a certain angle. All I'm trying to do is make it not straight up and down and not flat. So somewhere close to in between and make them similar. Okay, so I've cut that. It's in. This next one, when I cut it, I'm going to zoom in on this so you can see right there. I'm going to leave space between my paper and the clay, so that when I cut it, I can still run this at an angle like that. Okay, and you're just gonna have to decide where that space is. Okay, something like that, and then you'll cut that at an angle. If you put this on the very edge of the paper and cut it, your template's gonna be wide, and the proportions for these templates are pretty specific, that they wrap up pretty well where the top's flat and the bottom's flat. And if we cut them weird, we're going to have some sort of a wave going on. So it'll be like the top will have a little bump in it. It still might, but then come here, cut that. All right, scraps like this. I need you to be paying attention to this. If we just leave these out and let them sit over there, they're just going to get recycled. It's not that big of a deal. It's okay to recycle the clay, but that's perfectly good clay. So what I need you to do, I'm going to come in here and grab just a chunk of clay. That's going to be my bottom. That's all I need. The rest of this is going to get wedged up, and you're going to put it in your own bag of clay. So if you want to wedge it and spray some water on it to make sure it stays wet. You're going to put in your own bag of clay. This is going to be the clay you use for your handle, for your components, for other things like that. And you have that right there. Spray that. You can have me that bag right there. And then we're just going to set this in a bag. And you're going to do that fairly quickly. If you leave this out, it's going to dry and you're going to cause yourself problems. Again, what's the worst that happens? We throw it in the recycle bin. But I will come around while you're working and be like, hey, make sure you're putting your scraps in your bag. Okay, we don't want to waste clay. It's perfectly good clay to use. All right. So we have this. And one side is cut in and one side is cut out at that angle or that bevel. So the way I do this to score and slip, let me back up for a second. As you are working with clay, what you need to pay attention to is not flipping the clay around. If you're grabbing this clay and just throwing it around and you don't care where it lands, your clay is going to pick up stuff. Your clay is going to kind of break the clay particles, and it's going to want to warp, it's going to want to crack. So what we want to do is handle our clay pretty cautiously. So when I flip that over, it's gently, not just throwing it around. Okay, we got to slow down. And I put this on the edge of the table like that. I just bring my rake and I score that. It's one of the reasons why I like the rake so much. That was a super easy scoring. Do this other side. And then I'm going to add slip. So there's my slip. If you're ever out of slip, remember there's some over in the gray bucket. It has an orange top. The clay we're using is pretty workable, right? The first stage of clay. Do I have to slip it? Not really, because there's plenty of water. Should I anyways? Yeah, you should. It's going to help. Now, I'm going to lift this up and put it together. I like to put the big side on the bottom, and I'll do this towards the camera. I get these pushed together, and I start on one, and I call this zippering. So I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to move down, okay? And we just get those seams stuck together the best we can. And then when I get closer to the bottom, I flip that over so that I can finish zippering that. Now, let's make sure we haven't missed anything. So step 3 would be cut the beveled sides and cut out template. Step 2 was throw out clay just bigger than the template size. Step 4 is score and slip, put together and clean up, which is what I'm doing right now. So I scored and slipped it and I'm putting together, and I'm going to start to clean it up. Now, you could write this anywhere. Excess water is not your friend. There will be a time and place for water, but when we want things to go together, we don't want to put water on it. There's already enough water. We're just going to compress this clay and move it around. You might go, but it's not smooth. Compression's going to be better. So two little bits of advice. On the inside, I'll use my wood knife, and I'll just come on the inside while I support the outside, and I'll just run this up, compressing that. So this is number 5, is compressing the seam with a wood rib and then a metal rib. And now I'm going to do the outside with my metal rib. And I'm going to use the flat part of my metal rib. Let's see if we can't get this so you can see it. I'm going to start on the bottom, and I'm going to bend my metal rib with my thumb. I'm just going to start on the bottom and just, here, let's show you what it looks like right now. Okay, you can see the seam, right? So we're going to come in there, clean that up just a little bit. And now I'm going to come in here with my metal rib and just barely push on it and lift. And that's compressing that clay. And just one pass, the seam starts to disappear. Now I'm going to do this so that I can do it better. Come in there. The area that's given me the most problem had the most slip on it. Dry that out. All right, so now we compress that. Okay, so the seam's now compressed together, okay? Mostly I'm worried that it's gonna split open, but other than that, we just want it to look nice. Now, if I'm putting a handle on, I almost always put the handle on where my seam was. Kind of hides the seam, smooths it out a little bit. If there's still a little bit of a seam mark, when your clay's leather hard, you can come in with a sponge that's wet, and you can come in here and hit that with just a little bit of water to smooth and clean that up, okay? But only when it's leather hard. If you come in too much right now, for one, if I come in to try to smooth this up, my clay is so soft it's gonna wanna bend. This is fourth period, right? So it's want to bend, and it'll add too much water to it. So I have my seam right here. If I added a lot of water right there, what's actually going to happen is my clay is going to swell a little bit, and then when it dries, it's going to crack and open. So it's going to cause me problems, and what I want to do is compress it, and then it's like, when it's later, I can come in here and smooth that out just a little bit. Okay, is that enough information? We'll cover these things a little bit as we go as well. Or if you have an issue, just ask a question. All right, where were we at? Compress the rim, or compress the seam with the metal and wood rib. Oh, on my list, I skipped a step. So we're gonna go, number 6 is add a bottom. So as we go to add a bottom, whatever shape our clay is in, when we add the bottom, that's the shape it stays for the most part. So these are just little terracotta pots from Lowe's, and we call this truing this out. What we're gonna do is come in here and just barely push that in, and that'll help round it. It's nice because you can go something smaller to something bigger, okay? And there should be a bunch of those on there. And I'm going to flip this over and just barely true that out. I do have another one. I don't know where it went. Oh, it's down there. It's that cone thing right there. Will you pass that down here? This will be on the cart as well. It has a skinnier top, so it'll go in. The problem with this one, it's heavy. So if you push down at all, you're just gonna flail out your clay. So you've got to be extra careful with this one. Just true that, where these are quite light. Set those aside. Again, they'll be on this cart for you to use. Please put them back when you need to. Now we're gonna decide right now, do I want my mug to be a small top with a big bottom, or, oh yeah.
How can you get more drastic so that it's way skinnier at one end?
That's gonna be hard to do. That's a different template. If you want to do something more drastic, I would recommend finding some paper and get some arcs going.
Yeah.
And then what you need to do is come up with the angles here, cut them out, and then actually come in here and bend them to see how they work. Because if they don't line up pretty, so the edges line up pretty well, and then you go, is the bottom flat, is the top flat, or flat enough? There are probably a couple of softwares out there that you can do these kind of arcs on, like mug templates, and you could play around with them that way. Yeah, that's a great thing. This is just a good place to start so you can get a good result immediately. If you really do want to play around with that where it's more, you can grab one of these templates and continue it on so it's taller, and then change the angles and cut some of those out until you get what you want. So paper templates are great. Yeah. But you don't have to. You can start with these. All right, so the top, so is it going to be drunk this way? This is a perfectly fine. Or is it going to be this way? And it doesn't matter to me which way you do it. Both are acceptable when it comes to cups and mugs. We'll just probably go here, which means I'm going to be here. So I'm going to start here, and I want you to write this down as we go. So when I put a bottom on, I'm going to score the bottom. Trying to be careful. Okay, if you need to true it out again, if you kind of messed with it, whatever, I'm going to add slip to the bottom. And there are a bunch of ways to do this. I find this is a really good way to not mess up too much. So we slipped the bottom. We scored the bottom, we slipped the bottom. Now I'm going to take my clay, and the thickness should be about the same thickness we were working with before. This is going to be a little thinner, and that's fine. It shouldn't be super thin. If it's super thin, when you go to lift it up, it's going to sag, and it's going to kind of fold on itself. But all I'm going to do here is take that, set my mug or my cup on it. Now, this is super important. I'm then going to lift it off. And as you can see, I now have marks where I need to score. So that's that circle. It's just a really simple way of doing this. And I'm just going to score that. I'm not guessing. Just going to get that taken care of there. And then I'm going to assess and go, do I need more slip? I probably don't. So now I'm going to bring this back and set it right on that spot. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to twist it just a little bit so those score marks kind of lock together. So just twist that. Going to true the rim. Okay, if you want that to sit there for a minute, you certainly can. And then I'm going to cut. So this is what I want you to pay attention to. I scored it, I slipped it, I put it down, I lifted it and scored it. Someone's going to forget to score the other side. You're going to cut it, and it's not going to be as sealed as you want it to, and that bottom's going to fall off. Okay, so make sure you score it and slip it, put it down, lift it, score the other side, now put them together, and then cut it. Okay? The last thing I do is cut it. Because some people are also going to cut it and then try to get it scored and slipped together. You can do it that way. Just telling you this is a little easier. And we're just going to cut this, and it's going to taper or angle in just a little bit. Come all the way around. When we taper in our cuts just a little bit, that does a couple things for us. One, it starts to seal up our seam. So if I'm going straight down, I'm not putting any pressure on the seam. So that'll help to seal up our seam. 2, it adds a little shadow underneath, which I just like aesthetically. I like the idea that it'll lift on my piece just a little bit. It adds a little bit of life to it. And then the last thing it does is it adds a place for glaze to stop. So we haven't talked much about glaze, but if you have something that goes straight down and you glaze it all the way to the bottom and you overglaze it, which means you put too much on, that glaze is going to run all the way down and keep going until it hits the shelf in my kiln. And then when we go to pull it out, glass will be fused to my shelf and your piece is going to lose when I pull it apart. Okay, a big chunk of your piece will stay on my shelf. So what we do, we come in here and add this glaze stop, so you can see, so that when I glaze, I have a place to stop my glaze. But even more importantly, glaze, when it runs, anytime there's an angle change or a texture, it has to stop and pool there. And as it pools there, I call it thinking. What it's really doing is whatever material is behind it is finally catching up. And if you've glazed appropriately and it just barely ran, it'll pool right at that glaze stop and not run over. But if you double dip or triple dip, which again we'll talk about this later, and there's a ton of glaze running down, it's still going to keep going. But if it's just a little bit over, that glaze stop will save it. So kind of nice. All right, so that's trued out. Last thing I'm going to do here, on the inside, I have a seam with a little bit of scoring marks. All I'm going to do is take a paintbrush, probably the smaller one, and I just get that just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit wet, just so I'm not like sticking into the clay. And I'm just going to reach in here and smooth up that inside. Do you have to? No. Should you? Probably. Is your cup going to fall apart if you don't? Probably not. And now I've cleaned that up so we don't have the score marks showing. Okay. Where are we at? So we just put on the bottom. If you wanted to add a few basic features, now's a fine time, especially down below. But as you're doing it, you've got to handle this like it's a freshly hatched baby chicken, okay? If you grab this too hard, you're going to squish it, okay? If you set this down, it's going to squish. If you push it up against something, it's going to squish. And you've got to be careful. Now, by doing that, there's a really good chance that when this dries and fires, it'll actually bend in just a little bit because clay has a memory. And it's, my wife won't watch this. It's not like my wife's memory. She forgets the weirdest things. Like, and then she can recall like random phone numbers of a person she met once. Like, whatever. But you forgot our anniversary. No, just kidding. She didn't. Neither did I. Her anniversary, our anniversary is my sister's birthday. It's kind of nice. Something. Oh, this. Make sure whatever shape you're going to have is the shape it is before you store it. Now, I'm not going to add a lot of stuff to this right now. Okay? So it's going to get stored. I'm going to set that aside. Hopefully these are okay. I did these on Sunday. Yeah, they're good. So I'm going to pass one of these around. This is leather hard. It's not a soft leather hard, but it is certainly going to be workable. We're going to be able to start adding things to it. I could even come in here if I want to do my eyes, and I can push on them just a little bit, just being extra careful. But I'll be able to manipulate the clay a little bit. So I'm going to send that around. Just feel it. Give it a little squeeze, not a huge squeeze. And that's just been sitting under a bag since Sunday. If I took this and wrapped it up completely tight in a bag by itself, it would be even softer than this. And that would be great. Okay, so we need to decide what's next. So I usually come in here and I'll clean it up just a little bit, check my seams. You can come back in with your rib. But I wouldn't add many or anything really, but very, very few things on until it is a leather hard. Adding a handle to this would be hard. To the one I just made would be hard, but adding it to this will be okay. So let's look at a couple of things. My rim, little thinner, a little thicker. So something I can do, I can take my needle tool and I can come in here just on the inside and I'm just going to taper that in just a little bit. You can try to drink out of a thick rimmed cup, but it's not fun to do. So I'm just going to clean that up. If you want to do it on the outside as well, but now my both sides are about the same thickness. Okay, perfectly acceptable. Then I'd come in here with my sponge, smooth that out. Okay, next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to wipe it with a very, very lightly wet sponge, just the whole thing. Because it's been sitting for a couple of days. Remember when we talked about clay, we need to kind of warm it up a bit. This is going to help. I don't want to wedge it or hit it, but I do want to just tell it I'm here. And that should be good. Okay. We can true it just a little bit, but if you true it too much, you're going to split the clay. So just be mindful of those things. And then we're going to start to add stuff. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the facial features because we talked about that already, right? We've done a couple of days of playing around with those. If you haven't, please do. If you need to take clay home, you should practice that before you get here. But let's talk about a few other things. This cart is going to go away soon. It's kind of in the way. But over here, as you're doing stuff, you may come up with ideas for other things. And one of the things I don't want to do is stifle your creativity and direction. This is a face mug, right? But it's also yours. And I want you to play around with it and you to have some fun with it. So over here we have textures that are up here. We have rolling textures and we have stamping textures. Now, stamping into leather hard is pretty hard to do, but it can be done. We'll take this over there and see what we can do with that. There's some handmade textures, some other stamps, we won't worry about that. But this is what I came over to get. These right here. So let's bring this over here. And those will stay over there all the time because we're not going to say hi to the people at home. Just kidding. Don't say hi. All right. So these are silicone molds. And they're kind of cool. And you can play around with these if you want. And these are a great way of adding little embellishments. Now, I'm going to tell you, the finer the detail on these, the harder they are to get to function. So if you want to start out with something a little bigger or simpler, like little animal shapes or whatever, we can do that. And then the next thing on this cart, we have handle foam things. And I just found these last year. I've been trying to find a way to make it so you can make decent handles without understanding how to make handles. When I first learned to make handles, I was taking a seminar from a guy, and I knew how to make handles, but he was teaching me how to make them, really. And I asked him, I said, when am I going to get good at handles? And he said this, because most potters pull handles. They put a chunk of clay on, and then it's like milking a cow. You pull it so it stretches it and makes this nice organic handle. And I said, when am I going to get good at handles? He says, pull 100 handles. I said, okay, and I'll get good. He goes, then pull 100 more, and then pull 100 more. And he's like, then you're going to understand that you need to pull 100 more. I'm all, oh, that's a lot of handles. You don't have that much time. Okay, so we're going to get a decent handle that functions well, that looks good, without all that effort. And if you become a potter, you're going to get similar advice. Pull a lot of handles. Make a lot of them. So, all of these, the shape of the handle is the outside dimensions. So that's just a little bigger than that. There's one that's bigger than that. And you can just grab these, and these are kind of fun. What you can do is just kind of set that on there, and then you just imagine what's going on top and around that will be the handle, okay? And we can choose whatever. Now, for making handles, oh, that's kind of a nice one. You're going to start with, I'll make 3. Those 3. Okay. You're going to start with coils. So we're going to take our clay, and we're going to roll out a coil. Now, this is just my scrap clay. I'm going to roll it out into a little bit of water. Remember, we start with something that is thinner than our rolling pin. And I will roll that out in my water. Compression is your friend. If you wanted to wedge this, that's fine. A little more water. I'm not going to spray the water onto. I don't like that. I do like to roll it into. That helps soak it up just a little bit. And I'm looking for, if you just grab one of these, for something that's about that thick. Okay? And then I'm going to cut it. My needle tool. That should be okay. And we go like that. Now, from here, you decide, do you want it flat? Do you want it round? It's still going to flatten out a little bit. Do you want texture on it? So we can grab a texture. We'll just grab us a nice little, this guy's right. And we're just going to come in here and gently roll a nice little texture out. Okay? And then we're going to come in here. If you have a thicker one, this is thicker on the top here, I'm going to set that there. Just gently bend that around. Okay, you see how that handle gets made just like that? And then we're going to set it aside for a few minutes, probably 5 minutes. Okay, before I do that, I need to cut this flat. And I'm just going to set it right up there. Okay, let's do another one. So we have this, roll that out just a tiny bit more. If I want it flat, I'm just going to throw it out. Now this one starts here, and I'm going to bend it. If it cracks a little bit, just come in with your finger and hit that. Bend it, bend it, bend it. Okay, get that pushed in nice and compressed, nice and tight. And then I'm going to cut these so that they're straight along the bottom. Again, you don't have to put handles on, okay? That's not a requirement. Last semester, I made them put handles on, and a bunch of kids are like, but I don't want handles. And I said, tough, I don't care. Just kidding, I didn't say that. I said, C minus, that's what I said. Okay, and let's do one more since we're here. And get that on there and just bend that around. I would recommend, if you're going to do handles, that you do and make 2 or 3 for each mug. That way you can get it up there and go, oh, I actually don't like that shape. And you don't have to start over. Okay, that's just what I recommend. Okay, let's set that there. Good. Still don't need that tucked in. While I'm working, I should have this covered so it doesn't dry out anymore. That's something you need to pay attention to. Also, if it's a little bit dry, you can wipe it down with your sponge and put it back in a bag. That'll kind of soak into your piece, and then you can work with it. Let's look at these. These are fun little things. And there's flowers and there's other things in there. You're just going to take little pieces of clay. Should be fairly wet. And I'm just going to push it right down in there. I don't really need to let it sit. I'm just going to pop it out, see what happens. We've got ourselves a cool little seashell. I know, you'd think I was a magician, a magic man. We're just going to cut around that. If you're not getting the end result you think you should get, there are other things we can do. Like sometimes I'll leave a little bit of edge around it so I can score and slip that on and taper that. Another thing that sometimes I'll do, I'll take this here, I'll push that in, clean it up just a little bit. I'll score this and I'll actually just push it onto my mug. And you gotta kind of pay attention to the direction, but let's score that and do that, just so you can see a bit of slip. Same thing here. The reason why I can put it on and then pull it off and score it, or how I'm going to do this is I'm just going to come in here and score. It's a seashell, it belongs down here. And I'm just going to push that right onto it, compress it pretty well, and then peel it off. We've got ourselves a nice little seashell on there. Now, if it doesn't do what you want it to do, scrape it off and clean it up. You should be okay. But scoring and slipping that well is what you want to do. You can do this before you put on the face, after you put on the face, but you can make seashells for the eyeballs for all I care, right? There's all kinds of things you can do. Again, we already talked about facial features. Do you have any questions about those that I can answer real quick while I'm just waiting for the handles to dry a bit?
They can be as weird as we want, right?
Say that again?
It can be as like weird as we want, right? Face.
As Riz?
As weird.
Weird, yes. I heard Riz, I know that's a slang word that I'm not allowed to use at my house. Yes, weird.
Okay.
Do you have like an example?
I do not.
Okay. You just don't want us to know your secret.
Precisely.
Okay. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff in here. There's some fish. All right, before I put on the handle, that'll be about what we're gonna do, and then I'll finish up with some things. Do you have any questions on the requirements, the definitions, or the steps so far? Because as you are doing this, a lot of my answers are going to be what do your notes say? Okay, so if you're like, I don't remember what I'm supposed to do after this, what do your notes say? And you should go and look. Now, if you're like, I'm trying to attach my handle, but I'm having this problem, then we can have a conversation about that. But it's, what do I do after this? Attach your handle, or whatever your note says, right? So kind of look through that. All right, let's attach a handle. So we've got our area here, and I'm going to, before I attach them, just come in here and kind of look and go, which one do I like? That one's kind of nice. It may take shape as you have your face on there, and you should. Your face should go on first and then your handle last. It doesn't have to. Well, that's kind of nice, kind of like an ear. That one there, or upside down. I like this one. Okay. So, in theory, this is going to be a soft leather hard by sitting for 5-10 minutes, okay? So, I didn't mean to get rid of that yet. What I'm going to do here, while it's on there, just set that down, and I'm going to score the ends. Okay, add a little slip. And then I'm going to line this up. And you're just going to come in here and line it as where you want it. That back end doesn't fit, so I'm just going to tell myself where it's going to land. Pull that off. Score that. You can use your needle tool or your rake. A couple of things on handles for you and on just your designs to begin with. Anything that goes over the rim makes it so it's harder to wash in the dishwasher, hand wash, stack on a shelf, or anything like that, just so you know. Because you can't, like when I store my mugs, I store them upside down. That's how I store my mugs and my cup in my house. And so I don't want a handle that comes above the rim, because that's going to break. I don't care if you do it. I'm just telling you that's not how I would do it, because I'm going to store my mug like that. And that's how it'll sit on my cup, on my shelf. Unless it's on my little mug rack, which we have one of those too, or my bunch of mugs over there, or in my bedroom I have a whole bunch of mugs that we never use because they're from people I've collected mugs from, and then they're just sitting like that. So, okay, so I scored that, I slipped it. I'm now going to come in here, and I'm just going to work that in, and work that in at the bottom, like so. And really compress. If your clay is not leather hard and you're pushing on it, you're going to cause yourselves a lot of denting. It's not that big of a deal, but it could be. And I'm just going to come in here and smooth this out. If there ever was a good time to have a fingernail in the pottery class, it's right now. You could come in here and like clean this up. I go ahead and just use my wood knife on the inside of that handle and clean that up. Then I'll come in with my paintbrush and smooth it out. Now, the weakest parts are right here. So I'm going to add something there and right there. So there's a couple of things we can do. I like to just add little coils. So we're making and attaching handles. I just add a little coil. I'm going to spray that little coil down with water. And I'm just going to pack that down in there. You can wrap it all the way around if you want. One thing I'd maybe recommend you do if you're putting a handle on, go and look at different types of handles that are out there. Every mug maker or potter does their handles just a little bit differently. And in fact, there's a lot of potters out there that other potters can see their mug somewhere and go, that's so-and-so's mug, because their handles are specifically to that person. And I'm just compressing this in. Your handle and how you put stuff around it can also be an embellishment. So if you want it to look like a strap or string, or there's all kinds of things you can do. Just come in there, smooth that out if you want. Or another option is to come in and outline it. That's a thing. So we've got the handle on there. Okay, take a little bit of time, be careful with it. Storage for this. It's okay if you were to come in here and give it a very light misting before you put it away. That's okay. Don't come in here and soak it. If you soak it, it's going to crack. But if you give it a light misting and then throw it in a bag, it should stay at least where it's at, if not maybe a tiny bit softer next time. But when I say throw it in a bag, I literally mean put it inside the bag, fold the bag up on itself so that you can't get any air inside of it. If you leave that bag open at all, it's going to be drier than you'll want next time. And this is a 4-day project. I've scheduled 4 days, which means a couple of things. When I give you 4 days, I expect 4 days of work. I don't want to see, I hurried and made one, and then I'm done, okay? I want to see you pushing yourselves. If you got done at 3 days, I'm going to ask you to do something else, whether it's with your stuff or whether it's with something else clay-wise, okay? It's just a matter of working and working hard at things. Kind of went off my train of thought. 4 days. 4 days also allows you to make mistakes. So if you're at day 1 and day 2 you come in and you forgot to shut your bag and it's bone dry, no tears needed, although that will help hydrate your clay quicker, but I'm not kidding. And if you have magical tears, it might even grow something. But you can start over and you still have time, okay? If you're on day 2 and something breaks, you have time to still start over, okay? There's plenty of time to work as long as we're working. And there's also plenty of time to get better at things and push ourselves and grow and whatever. The thing I haven't talked about is colored slip. And it's a pretty simple discussion. Right back here, we have colored slips. Okay, there's other places that have color in this room. Over on that side, we have underglazes That's a different thing than colored slip. So you have colored slips here, and these two pots are the keys to the colored slip. So colored slip can only go on greenware clay. So workable leather hard bone dry only. The best time to put it on is a hard leather hard to bone dry. I don't like it on bone dry, but I do like it where it's a nice hard leather hard. Now the key to this is you come over here and find a color you want on either one of these, and then you go find the number that's carved into that, 6021, and that's what you're gonna get when it's all said and done. Okay, so I want you to look at something real quick. We don't have a ton of time. That color is not that color, correct? So this is your first introduction to how colors in clay fool you. There's going to be a lot of these. I have a red full-on glaze that comes out green. Okay, it's mind-blowing. Actually, it's not, it's just science. But as we're doing this, I'm going to put this on. It's going to dry and come out about that color. But when I bisque fire it, it's going to come out like this bottom right there. And then when I clear glaze it, it's going to come out like I want it to. So you've got to understand that down the road it's going to happen. So we're going to come in here. I picked out that color. I'm going to grab my paintbrush and wash it out just a little bit. And since it's red, I guess stir it just a tiny bit. It should be the thickness of like whipped cream before you whip it into whipped cream. So it's called whipped cream or heavy cream. And he's gonna get some red eyes.
Can you mix colors?
You can. I can't guarantee what they're gonna look like. If you mixed red and blue, are you gonna get a purple? Probably. But I don't know, especially because the optical color is not the chemical color, which is the all the way fired color. So you might get a great color now, you might love this color, but it's not gonna be that color when we're done. Good. I don't normally give presents to students, but this might just be coming back to your house.
That cup shows up in my nightmares sometimes.
It already has? So this cup is a manifestation of your nightmares. Interesting. Okay, so that's that. Now, what are we going to talk about glazes? You should add color to your pieces. If you add color here, we're going to put clear glaze on them. And there's some other options. There's browns and other things. Again, this goes to your specifics. We're going to talk about the makeup of glazes soon. If you want to just take this and just dip the whole thing in one color, you don't need to put any colored slips on it. I'm not making this a requirement, although it can be part of your thing. So it should be part of your exploration. What do you want to accomplish? Red eyes. I'm gonna look sick. I could grab a white, make the teeth really white, right? If I wanted to. You could make the lips a color. You can make it have some skin tone. There's all kinds of things you can do with it. You tell me what you want and I'll help guide you where you should be. We're just learning how to make projects. So, any questions? So, Friday, we are doing a will demo. There's going to be more notes. It's the whole day. I'll be up here throwing. We'll be watching it on the screen. Next Tuesday, we're starting. Half of you will be back on the wheels. Half of you will be starting your mugs. We're going to spend 4 days, and then we're going to switch and spend 4 more days. So, or maybe, 4 more days. So, do you have any questions? Yeah.
When do we have to upload this?
It's not on Google Classroom yet, so we'll do that. I'll do it both with the wheel throwing and this one all at the same time. It'll just say this demo and that demo all at one time. Good question. On the back is another area to sketch out. There are 4 things. Most of you have already done 2. I'm still asking you to do 2 more. Whether you take what you've done before and refine it into something more specific now that you've played around with it and seen the process, or you come up with a whole new design. I don't care. But at least 2 more, so you have a total of 4 photos or sketches. You need to have sketches to start, otherwise you're just winging it, and I promise you're not good enough at ceramics yet to just wing it. Or maybe you are, but I doubt it. All right, put up your chairs, see you, bye.